Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our May 10th presentation on special events and communities. Are you protected? My name is Alina Gilbert. I will be presenting this amazing, titillating webinar today. And so I just want to thank everyone who is joining us today because as you can see, we are starting to use a new webinar platform for our webinars moving forward. And it's a little bit different than what you're used to, but hopefully it is both better and easier to use for you guys. So housekeeping, still like before, you know, the bulk of your screen should be the PowerPoint presentation. Me, the presenter, hello, I'm on the left side, and you can actually shrink my picture and increase the size of the PowerPoint, which you probably want to do, please. And on your right side, there is a chat icon. And that's the one you're going to click on and type in all your questions as we move through the webinar. As always, we are going to save questions for the end, and I will try to get through all of them. Time permitting, and if not, you will have my email address is going to pop up on the very last slide, so you can just reach out to me directly if you need to, and I'll try to get everyone taken care of. And kind of the other thing is we really want to get some feedback from you guys as far as this new platform, and whether you love it, hate it, have suggestions, thoughts. So as soon as this webinar finishes, an automatic poll is just going to pop up on your screen, and it's going to ask you questions about the presentation itself and the presenter and the materials. But at the end, there's also room to add in whatever you want to add. So to the extent you guys have thoughts, comments, and feedback for us, please put that in, because that's what helps us kind of move forward with this and see if we need to make any tweaks or adjustments to the platform or to the way we're presenting on the platform. So any and all feedback would be greatly appreciated. So a couple of new things on this one. If you are having issues connecting, there should be a little button on the bottom that says no audio or video ? Click on that, and that'll take you through steps to get you all corrected and hooked up correctly so that you can see me and you can hear me and you can see the PowerPoint. If you are still having issues after that, please call Summer, who is our education coordinator, and she can help you. Her direct line is 303-991-2076. You can also email her at ssims, S-I-M-S, @altitude.law, and she can help you with whatever your technical issues might be. As always, there will be a CMCA, one CMCA credit generated for you attending this presentation, as long as you attend for the entire duration. And the cool thing with this platform is you should get it pretty much automatically after the end of the webinar. It should pop in your inbox, and it's going to be a really pretty certificate with your name on it. It's going to be very cool. So extremely excited to use this platform. And the other thing we're going to be able to do now is do some polls and some quizzes and things like that. So I had to build in some questions into this presentation, just so we can play with it and see how it works for all of us. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I always say this, we have a lot of material to get through, but we should still have plenty of time for questions at the end. And let's see here. So if you see me going slowly, it's only because I'm still new with this platform. And so I should have had my sweaty balls up there for you guys to see while I was talking about all the housekeeping things, but I did not. So there you go. I'll give you 2 seconds to look at that, and then we shall move on. All right. Special events. So for the purposes of this class, I really want to focus on two general types of special events. The first one being association-sponsored events, and the second kind being owner-sponsored events. And so that's how this is broken down. We're going to first talk about association events. And before we do that, are you guys ready? We are going to have, ta-da, our first poll. Do you obtain special, actually, this is the wrong one. That's okay. That one's coming up anyway. So when you hold special events, do you obtain special events coverage? All right, yay, you guys are answering this. Very cool. So I see a lot of no's. You guys should be seeing the results on your screen as well, so you can kind of see where you fit in with your answers. Wow, okay. Some yeses, quite a few no's, and some I don't knows. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll. And so the results are going to disappear when I stop it. So take a quick peek, see where you fit in. All right. So the other question I'm going to ask you is one more poll. And this will be a really quick one. And this should have been the first one, but does your association sponsor special events? Let's do this one real quick. I suspect most of you will say yes. But just to get an idea of our demographics, you know, are we talking, do your communities do special events? So it looks like a vast majority do special events, some do not. Perfect. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take the results off the screen at this point. Again, I'd love feedback on these little polls too. So if you like them, you hate them, they're kind of cool, they're kind of difficult to figure out, let me know. All right, so when we talk about association-sponsored special events, I mean, there probably is an endless list of things that you guys have seen, that you've been involved in. I mean, anything from pool parties to holiday celebrations. You get your Easter egg hunts, July 4th picnics, wine tasting, movies, concerts, workout sessions, poker night, and what else? I mean, there's a lot of other stuff out there, right? So that is the type of stuff we're talking about, and anything else that you guys want to fit in there. So there are a few things that we want to look at, and we'll talk about each of these items in more detail. But these are the things you really want to make sure you consider. One is who's going to attend. The next one is what kind of activities are you going to have? Is there going to be some kind of equipment, anything that could injure folks? Is it bouncy castles? Is there going to be sports, walking, running, dancing, any of that kind of stuff? Things that may, you know, to those of us who are klutzy like me, you know, if we can slip and fall, we will. So are there things that are going to be part of this event that could injure someone who's a big klutz? Venue, that's like where are you holding it? And then alcohol. Are you serving alcohol? Is it free? Is it for sale? Okay, so let's look at each one of these in some detail. All right, so who can attend? And really, what I'm looking at right now is, are you opening it up to the public, or is it just owners, residents, and their guests? For the most part, I know that most communities, it's for owners, residents, and their guests. But I have seen situations where we have events that are open to the public. So for example, let's say you have a bigger community, you got a giant park that's part of the association, and you're going to sponsor a movie night. And that movie night's open to anyone and everyone who wants to show up. We're kind of getting now into the, hey, it's kind of open to the public. I mean, you're not checking IDs to make sure they live there. You're not issuing, you know, bands for their arms to make sure it's owners or residents and their guests. So it becomes more of a public venue at that point. And the reason this makes a difference to us is because if you are considered to be using a public venue or creating a public venue because you're opening the event up to the public, you have ADA considerations now. ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it's not to be confused with the FHAA, which is the Fair Housing Amendments Act. So under the fair housing laws, which associations are subject to, that's when you have to make those, reasonable accommodations, reasonable modifications to owners and residents who are disabled and they're requesting some sort of an accommodation or modification. The ADA is different in that it has affirmative requirements. In other words, no one's requesting it. You, by virtue of being a public venue, have to have these things in place. And so if normally the ADA does not apply to associations. And the reason is that in most cases, associations are private. Our property is private. It's used for private functions, and therefore the ADA doesn't apply. But once you start using your property as a venue for some sort of a public event, then we start to get into that, I call it the gray area of, are we now a public place that requires ADA upgrades? So I see this a lot. The gray area happens a lot, like for example, with swimming pools. There's associations that sponsor swim meets, and like different schools come and compete and people can come and watch and things like that. Is it truly public? Yeah, technically, I guess if anyone wants to come watch, they could. And so does it fall under a public use, and does it create ADA compliance requirements? We don't know for sure, but somebody could absolutely make that argument that this is being used now for a public purpose, therefore you must be ADA compliant, which requires, as you probably know, like anytime you go into a public building, you got to have all the handicap accessible entrances, the ramps, the bathrooms have to be ADA, outfitted for wheelchairs. You're going to have a specific lift in the pool and certain other things that's required by the ADA. And that's an expensive proposition. So I just want you to be aware of this, because when you and your communities are planning events, be very careful with who they are open to, because again, once it becomes more public in nature rather than private, you are going to start being subject to ADA requirements. And if someone gets injured and you get sued because you were not ADA compliant and this was a public event, there's a world of hurt the association could get into, and we don't want that. Okay, so that's kind of important. The other one is, are you sponsoring events that are adults only and that you say are adults only? Because if you are, you may be acting in a discriminatory manner and exposing your association to liability. I have these conversations fairly often with boards, and they're never happy to hear it, but ultimately I've had boards say, we're going to sponsor like an evening holiday event for adults. And they put it in there, adults, no one under 18, no one under 21, whatever. So technically that's a form of familial discrimination. And what's familial discrimination? Familial discrimination is treating certain families different than other families. It's not so much that children in and of themselves are protected, but it's families with children. So if I have a family and I've got kids and you are sponsoring an adults only event, that means I cannot go with my entire family to this event. My kids have to stay home. As opposed to a family that chose not to have children or have children that are grown up, they can attend. So that is considered a form of discriminatory, it's a discriminatory action. So whether you agree with it or not, or whether you think it's reasonable or not, that is the law. So be careful with events and how you're marketing them to your homeowners and residents, because if you're putting adults only, I would discourage that because that is going to expose the association to liability. What I have a lot of associations do, They try to make an adults only event without making it adults only. Like they'll describe the event, it's going to have alcohol, we're going to have poker games, and they're kind of hoping that, parents use their common sense and say, we're not going to bring our children to this thing. It doesn't sound like a child-friendly event. But if they want to bring them, we should not be saying, no, they can't come in, because that is the discriminatory action right there. And honestly, this is a really complicated legal concept, all this discrimination and the reasonable accommodations and ADA. And we've taught classes just on these topics alone. So there's definitely a lot more here that we can talk about, but we're not going to, because we have a whole bunch of other information we still need to get through before we get to, before we can finish this class. And I want to make sure I save room. So again, this is a really deep subject, and there's just a lot there. All right. Activities that can injure. So we talked about, what is that? Are you having some sort of sporting event? Are there games that require, physical, need to be physically able to perform them? Do we have these bouncy castles? What do we have? And if you recall at the beginning, I asked how many of you guys have or get special events coverage when you host these special events for your communities. And there were a lot of no's and a few I don't knows. And that's a problem. Because what happens is you all have insurance in your communities for liability, based slip and falls, things like that, on common areas. But there are exclusions in your policies that exclude special events. In other words, if the reason someone slipped and fell is because they were attending some party that the association hosted on a common area, your regular liability policy in most cases will not cover you if you get sued as the association because somebody got hurt, because it was during a special event, and that's an exclusion under the policy. So what special events coverage is, it's basically an additional policy. You kind of get one as you need one. And what it does is it covers the association as the host if it gets sued because somebody who was attending the event got injured. And there's different carriers, and every policy might be a little bit different, but they're all, fairly similar in the sense that they cover you for liability-based claims that happen during some sort of a special event that you, as the association, host. You can get it up to 5 days of coverage. I don't think you usually would need that, but if you have an event that spans more than 1 day, then certainly you could do that. However, you need to be aware that there are some pretty common exclusions in these special events policies, which could impact what you do. So communicable diseases, you guys remember this? This was big during COVID. If you recall, when everybody was getting pool waivers, or you weren't sure if you were going to open the pool or not, because if somebody caught COVID and they blamed the association, they sued the association, you were not going to be covered because that's a communicable disease issue. These exclusions have always been there. This is nothing new, but they are excluded. And honestly, we really haven't seen claims based on communicable diseases. I don't really know any association that's been sued because someone got COVID or caught the flu or something while they were attending an association event. So that's good. But some other things that are excluded that you should be aware of are things like fireworks, amusement park devices. So if you have mechanical rides, pony rides, inflatables, and I know I have seen events that associations sponsor where they use inflatables, kids can jump or adults can jump in there or whatever. And then lakes and pools. So all of these things to me are problematic because associations, you do shoot fireworks for the 4th of July. You may want to have some sort of affair with mechanical rides or pony rides or something like that, and then, jumpy castles. You may want to do something in the pool area. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is you would need to consult with the association's insurance broker when you're getting your special events coverage and tell them, hey, this event, we're probably going to do fireworks. We want to have a bouncy castle. We want to have pony rides. What can we do to protect? Is there anything we can add that will protect us if we get sued? And if the answer is no, you're not going to have protection, then boards really, really need to think hard about whether this is an event that the association should be sponsoring. I mean, I love July 4th fireworks as much as the next person, and I would love to go see those. And a lot of associations put those on, but if someone gets injured by the fireworks or while they're, setting off the fireworks or however it is you're doing it, that could be a problem if you get sued and now you don't have any insurance to cover your legal fees to defend yourself in court. Okay, so those are all things that are extremely important to remember. And I know I'm kind of being like a party pooper here. I'm saying, hey, you want to have all these fun parties, but wait. But these are really important things. And unfortunately, the liability piece does not go away. And everyone would like to think they have great owners and great residents who aren't going to sue them. But I think we know better. And I think right now the state of the world where people are angry and they're litigious, it's just even more of a risk, I think, at this point. So please make sure that your boards, your associations are obtaining the coverage. Talk to them, talk to the insurance brokers if you're going to have any of these common exclusion factors and see whether or not you can get coverage. Because again, if you can't, my recommendation is don't do it. Waivers and releases, sometimes that's a good idea depending on what it is specifically you're hosting. Sometimes, like for example, if it's, hey, we are going to have we're going to have a swim meet of owners. All owners are going to compete against each other. Do we want someone like who's competing to sign a waiver saying I'm doing this at my own risk? Sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes if you're having a holiday party, I don't think you're going to want your residents or attendees to sign waivers in order to attend the holiday party. I think that might not look real good for the association. Why am I signing a waiver to go to your party? What kind of party is this? So again, consult with your attorneys on the waivers and releases and whether or not it's a good idea for any specific event. All right, venue, another good one. So venue is basically where you're holding the event, right? So you're either going to hold it in the community or you're going to hold it outside the community. And if you're holding it in the community, that's fine. There's not a whole lot of extra considerations there. But if you're holding it outside the community, then there's additional insurance considerations that should be looked at. So, for example, if you're borrowing, let's say you are a smaller community and you don't have a clubhouse, but you've got an HOA next to you that has a beautiful, gigantic clubhouse, and you arrange to use that clubhouse for your association's event. It's not that far, it's not that far out of reach. So let's say you do that, or you rent a venue like a hall or some sort of restaurant area. So now you got other things you got to start thinking about, and that is, well, this isn't my property. This isn't the association's property. What happens if, the homeowners and the residents get out of hand and then they do something stupid and then they cause damage? What happens in those cases? What happens if I have to cancel now? I forgo my deposit, all those types of things. So in that case, there is something that's called extended special events coverage. And that is what you would want to have if you are hosting the event outside the association properties. So it'll protect you, like if there's damage to the property, it'll step in and pay. If there's a cancellation and you lost the deposit, or there's a fee associated with cancellation, it'll make the association poll. So again, that's the other thing you should be aware of when hosting events. If you're doing it outside the association, then you're going to need this extended special events coverage. And again, you're going to want to speak with the association's insurance broker to help you kind of figure out what exactly you would need for the special event you're planning on hosting. All right, alcohol. So let's do a poll. Awesome. Do you serve alcohol at association-sponsored events? I'm going to give you guys just a few seconds here to get me your answers. And nobody can see how you're voting, by the way. All you can see is the total numbers. So don't worry, nobody's going to identify you. I can't see who you are either. So don't be afraid to answer these questions. All right. Ooh, looks like half and half right now, 30-30. Okay. Okay. So about 2/3 of you have answered this. I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll. Okay. More no's than yeses. Okay. Okay. So if you are hosting an event and there is alcohol at the event, there's a few things you got to be aware of. Okay. You want to make sure, as far as insurance goes, that you have host liquor liability as part of your special events coverage. Typically, it's included. Like I said, every insurer is a little bit different. And so you want to be super, super safe and make sure that you have that coverage. So check again with your insurance broker when you're getting your additional special events coverage to make sure that that's included because you're serving alcohol. Now, if you're actually selling alcohol, which I've seen happen before, you have to have a liquor license to sell alcohol. And you have to have retail liquor liability as part of your special events coverage because you're acting as a retailer and you're selling alcohol. Now, if you're hiring like professional bartenders to come and they've got all their licenses, you should be okay. But you still want to make sure you have the host liquor liability at a minimum. But also, again, check with your broker and see, make sure that they understand that you're having bartenders come in and what do we want to make sure we have in addition to host liquor liability, if anything. You probably won't need anything else because they are insured and they are licensed and they have their liquor license. And so it's kind of like you're hiring an agent, to be able to do this for the association. Okay. But liquor is important. There's, as you know, there's a lot of liability exposure with liquor because someone drinks too much, they leave the party, they get in their car and they have a car accident. Well, guess who's going to get blamed? Certainly it's not the person attending for drinking too much. No, it's you for letting them drink too much. So we want to make sure there is ample coverage for any association that hosts events that have liquor. All right. I like these. Who needs oil? I ride the bus. All right. This is our comedic break. Now we're going to move on to the next part of the presentation, which is the owner-sponsored events. So let's look at these. All right, we're going to do a poll real quick. All right, here we go. Does your association let owners rent out any common elements for personal use? I suspect most of you will probably say yes, but I'm already seeing a few no's. Yeah, more yeses than no's. Awesome. Okay, get your votes in. I'm about to stop this poll. All right, so we got 74% saying yes and 26% saying no, and that's about what I would expect to see. So, you know, owners rent out facilities for various reasons, right? They want to do a private party in the clubhouse. They want to have a pool party. Sometimes they want to do some sort of like a sales event, like a, I hate to say Tupperware party, it's somewhat outdated, but something like a Tupperware party. They want to rent out the park. If they want to do an outdoor party, they want to do some sort of yoga class, other exercise groups, weddings, picnics, graduation parties, baby showers, you name it, right? You guys have probably seen the full gamut of kind of what homeowners want to do. And sometimes it's a little surprising and sometimes it's a little scary. But, you know, once you open up a common area for personal, private use, you're going to get all sorts of interesting requests, I suspect. So let's do one. This is going to be the last question we do, okay? So when you are renting out common elements, do you require owners to complete either an application or sign some sort of a use agreement? I'm seeing a lot of yeses, but I don't have that many people who have answered. And there's reasons I'm asking you this, and we're going to cover it in a minute, but okay. Okay. Yeah, so it looks like most of you are saying yes, which is good to hear. A few of you are saying no, and I would recommend you do require something. But like I said, we'll get to that. All right. Perfect. Thank you. So when we talk about owner-sponsored events, there's really three things we want to be looking at primarily. One is, do we have a reservation application or a rental agreement? Are we using one? And what does it say? We're also going to be looking at who can attend, and we're going to be looking at the limitations on the types of events. Okay. So let's look at each one of these now in some more detail. Reservation applications. So for those of you who are using, and that's most of you, who are using some sort of document, whether it's an application or a rental agreement, a use agreement, all of the above, I want to go through just some stuff that you want to make sure you're addressing in those agreements or applications, because they are things that come up over and over and over again. Okay, and you want to make sure that you as the association are adequately protected to the extent that things go wrong. And then we're not assuming things are going to go wrong, but just remember, this is, you got to imagine kind of like worst case scenario, make sure you're protected against it. Because otherwise, you know it's going to happen, right? Okay, so a few things to think about and to address in these documents. Owner versus non-owner. Do you allow non-owner residents to reserve the clubhouse for personal use? Remember, your legal enforcement rights when it comes to the declaration are only against the owner. They're not against the renter or the roommate or anyone who is not an owner in the community. So if you enter into a lease agreement with a non-owner, which I'm not saying you can't, you can, but you need to be aware then of a couple of things. One is your only recourse if this person does something they're not supposed to do is through this contract. You only have a contract breach recourse. You're not going to be able to treat it as a violation of the covenants. Okay. So for that reason, there's a lot of associations that basically say either we want you to be an owner, or the owner has to sign off on this along with the resident, so that the owner basically says, yes, I'll be accountable for whatever happens, because then we can go through the owner as well. Okay. Deposits. Do you guys take deposits when you are allowing someone to lease property or to use property? Is it refundable or non-refundable? How much are you asking them to deposit? So if it's refundable, I would recommend asking for a lot more than you would for a non-refundable deposit, because you just need to think about the possibility of damages to the property and what that might look like. And if there's real damages, usually the deposit is not even going to be enough to pay for all the damages. Cleaning checklists. So a lot of associations will actually have a separate checklist that they attach that basically has a checkbox for everything. You know, it's like vacuum the floors, take out the garbage, put away the dishes. I mean, whatever it is you want to do. So it's a checklist of everything the user has to do after the event ends. Okay. And what happens if they don't do it? Is there, you know, a fee associated with it? Walkthroughs, sometimes associations will do walkthroughs, like we're going to do a walkthrough with the user before the event, and then we're going to do a walkthrough after the event. You don't have to do that, but it's just that extra layer of protection. Time of the event. Are you going to limit, you know, time of the event? Like, does it have to end by 10 p.m. because it's an outdoor event and there's people? Does it have to end at midnight because it's the clubhouse and we're going to lock it up? Right? So does the time of event matter? And are we going to limit how long the event can be? Like, can you only allow use of the clubhouse 2 hours at a time? Or can it be an all-day thing? Can it be an all-evening thing? Again, things to consider. Number of attendees. So with like the clubhouse, you have a maximum occupancy limit there. And that's usually based on fire code, and it should be posted, and you never want to allow more people than that to be using the facility. So you're going to need to cap how many people you can have at the event if it's like in the clubhouse, if it's not outdoors. You need to have a hold harmless clause, which basically is if I'm using this facility, I'm not going to come after you HOA because I'm not happy with whatever. I'm not happy with how the event turned out. I'm not happy with how clean, you know, the clubhouse was. I'm not happy with, you know, that the dish was broken that I was going to use. Again, whatever the reason is, we want a hold harmless clause. We also want an indemnification clause that basically says if the association gets sued because of something stupid that happened at the clubhouse or wherever the event was. So let's say it's an outdoor party and they're supposed to be done by 10 p.m. and they're out there till 2 a.m. and homeowners are calling the police and they're all upset, and now they're going to go after the HOA because we did not enforce the 10 p.m. curfew. You want to make sure there's something in that agreement that says I, as the homeowner who screwed up, or I, as the, you know, host of the event, am going to indemnify you. In other words, I'm going to pay for your legal fees to defend you. In reality, that's not how it works. In reality, what's going to happen is you're still going to submit a claim to your own insurance carrier, but then your insurance carrier can go after that owner or that host or their insurance policy. So that's generally how it works. A few more things on these owner items. By the way, I love this meme. It's hilarious. Sorry, you guys know I have a weird sense of humor. Okay, so reservations, applications, rental agreements, clear rules of conduct. Are you going to specifically say, you know, obviously no loud noises that impact, you know, residents who live near the clubhouse or outside the playground? No throwing things, no breaking things, no glass bottles, you know, however you guys want to do that. Alcohol, are you allowing alcohol? If you are, the homeowner should indicate there's going to be alcohol so that we know. You also want to make sure to require that owner to get the special events coverage with that additional extra endorsement, because what they're doing is they're using property that isn't theirs. So if they cause damage, we want to make sure that there's money there to fix the clubhouse. If they broke some walls and got out of hand and Joe had too much to drink and punched a hole in the wall, you know, we want to make sure that that money's there. So we want to make sure that there's insurance in place. we want to have the association as an additional insured. Now, be careful with additional insured, and this is true when you're, retaining a contractor as well, and you're saying we want to be an additional insured. Just getting that summary page of the policy that says association is insured on here is not enough. Okay, all that means is, yes, we're on there, but we do not have an independent right to submit a claim to the policy. It still has to go through the policy owner. So we can't force a claim to be submitted. What we want is a certificate of insurance that specifically says the association is an additional insured. We need a separate certificate, not the summary page, that says that. Because then, and only then, is the association truly considered one of the owners of the policy, and we can submit a claim against the policy instead of relying on the owner to do that. Okay, so that's absolutely something we want to make sure homeowners do if they're using our facilities. We definitely want to make sure they have the extra insurance in place. We want to make sure the owners understand they're liable for any damage that they cause, that they're responsible for anything their guests do. Again, excessive noise, that's really part of the rules of conduct. And then what happens if there's a violation? Again, that's if there's a violation, part of that is going to be covered by the insurance policy if it's physical damage. Part of it is going to be the homeowner's requirement that they indemnify the association if we're the ones getting sued. So it just depends on kind of what goes wrong at that event. Whew. Wow, that's a mouthful. You guys know, for those of you who have attended classes that I've taught, you know how excited I get when it comes to insurance, because I love insurance and it's fun and exciting, and said no one ever except Elena. All right. Who can attend? Question, is it open to the public? So it's exactly the same analysis as when we talked about association-sponsored events, because if a homeowner has some sort of a open to the public event, now again, do we have to be ADA compliant in order to be able to, because it's a public event and we don't want to get sued because we're not ADA compliant. So you want to be very kind of cognizant of that, and not, you don't want to allow owners to have anything that's even remotely close to a public event. It should all be private. All right. Okie dokie. Limitations on the types of events. So what I really want to talk about, honestly, is the religious events. To me, that's kind of the big thing here, because this is what leads or could lead to some liability exposure for associations. So religious events can take all sorts of forms, right? I listed a few, but obviously there's a lot more than that. There's prayer groups, baptisms, bar mitzvahs, whatever it is. So those are all religious events. And the rule here is, if you allow one religious event, you got to allow all religious events. Okay? Because there is such a thing as discrimination based on religion. Religion is a protected class under both state and federal laws, fair housing laws, which means we can't treat different religions differently. So to the extent you allow a baptism, now you gotta allow the Jehovah's Witnesses to have their event, and you gotta allow, all types of religious events, whether they're your religion, whether you like the religion, whether you don't like the religion, doesn't matter. You gotta allow all of them. And that's really the rub, I think, with most folks, is that you're okay with a baptism, but you may not be okay with some other form of a religious event. So you either allow them all or you allow none. That's the rule. If you allow one, you gotta allow every single one. All right. So, because otherwise you are discriminating based on religion, and there's a huge liability exposure there. Political events, it's very similar. I think if you're going to allow one political event, you really want to allow all political events. And this is politics, obviously. Politicians, thank God, are not a protected class. But there is still the concept of we have to treat everyone the same, all owners the same. And so we don't want somebody saying, well, you let Bob put on his, we love Trump campaign, but you're not letting me do my I love Biden campaign, right? So you can't base that on your political view. You can't base it on anyone's political view. It's basically, if you're going to allow a political event, you got to allow all of them. Obviously, there could be a few exceptions here and there, but ultimately, the best thing is maybe allow none of them. So rules and guidelines, which is kind of where they come in, which is if you're going to govern the types of events that people can have, you definitely want to make sure you have that written out somewhere. So if you specifically want to say, we don't allow religious events or political events or sales events, commercial events, you can do that. The association has broad discretion with respect to common area and allowing its use and what it can be used for. But you just want to make sure you're treating everyone the same across the line, and especially with religion. So I think like if you have a homeowner who you allow to host a Christmas party, and then you have another homeowner who comes to you and says, I want to host a Hanukkah party, or I want to host a Yom Kippur party, even though it's not really a party, but they want to host an event that's based on their religion. Well, guess what? You're going to need to do that because some of it is religious, some of it is ethnical. Ethnicity is also a protected class. Some of it is like where you were born. So I may want to have a party. I may want to have a Russian drinking vodka dancing party, and that's a Russian thing. And you can't say no to me because you let my neighbor from Germany host the beer drinking party last week. So again, you just want to be consistent. That's really what I'm going for here, is just treating kind of all groups the same. Now you can have rules that, for example, say you can't have events with alcohol, right? You can do that. And so therefore you can say, no vodka drinking parties, Alina, you and your Russian people can go to the bar and drink that. Or you can say, no beer drinking. So no, the German party has to go somewhere else. And that's fine as long as you don't allow alcohol across the board. And you can say, no more than 30 people at any given event. That's fine too. And you can approve and deny based on those factors. And those are factors that apply to everyone exactly the same. But you can't, if you're going to deny something based on what it is, like the content of the event, what it's based on, that's when it becomes problematic. So be careful and consult your attorneys. That's really the best thing you can do if you're not sure as to what's happening or whether you should or shouldn't allow something. Talk to your attorney, your attorney meaning the HOA attorney. Let them help you work through it and let them help you kind of figure out what is the best way to go about whatever it is you're trying to do or not do. And I love these unexplainable pictures because this guy's just holding a sewing machine with a UPS truck back there. And I don't know. Am I the only one who thinks these are funny? I hope you guys think these are funny. But we are ready for questions. We got 12 minutes. Let's hope we can get through all of them. Okay. When does allowing member guests become an open event to the public? So honestly, members and guests is not going to be considered open to the public. It's kind of when you say anyone, it can be anyone, like anyone off the street can come and join. So for example, if you're doing movie night at the park, okay, and you're not checking, people's IDs to make sure they live in the community, to make sure they're guests, you're not giving the wristbands, so it's only for, residents and their guests, that could be considered a public event, because technically anyone off the street can come in and attend. All right. Next question. Concerning movie night at the HOA park, can we avoid issues with the ADA by checking IDs? Yes, and posting no trespassing signs. Absolutely. And making it clear also when you publicize these events that these are only open to owners and residents and their guests. That's it. Would that also include food trucks? I don't think food trucks are going to make you a public place. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking about, but if that's what you're asking, food trucks aren't going to make it public. It's just an avenue for people to get food when they're at the event. What about liability when an association is sponsoring another organization's event, like providing a treat truck for another organizational event? If we're not sponsoring the event, I'm not overly concerned. The only thing I would be concerned is that if you're sponsoring like a food truck and somebody gets food poisoning, there's always a chance that, you know, they're gonna sue whoever sponsored the event, but maybe they're gonna drag your community into it as well because you sponsored it. So I would check with the insurance broker for the community and be like, hey, we're sponsoring a food truck. Do we need to get any additional liability coverage on this? It's not our event, but we're paying for the food truck. So just make sure that that's covered under your current liability policy should that happen. What if people are bringing their own? And I assume you mean booze. Again, if we're allowing alcohol and it's a BYOB, I think we certainly have more protection as opposed, because we're not serving it. So somebody can't say, oh, you served too much to this person and then they, drove drunk home. But I think someone can still make a claim that you were the host, you were supposed to be monitoring it, you saw someone was drunk, you let them get in their car. So I think in that case, I would also check with your insurance broker when you're getting the special events coverage, just to make sure that if somebody makes a claim like that, you would be covered under the policy. And it probably wouldn't be host liquor liability, but it would be something different. But like I said, I always would check with the insurance broker. Let's see. Our servers have to have tips training. So that's like if you're retaining, so if the servers are actually employed by the association, we really don't want that. We prefer that they be an independent contractor so they have their own insurance and their own requirements. If we employ them, that's like a whole different ball of wax, and that could expose the association to liability if they do something wrong, if they're an employee. What about non-owner renting the clubhouse? A non-owner is related to the owner, and the rental, FBO owner, i.e. anniversary party, whatever. If it's not the owner, it doesn't really matter if they're related to the owner or not. If it's not the owner signing and the owner isn't acknowledging, you just need to understand that, if something goes wrong, then we have to use that contract, that agreement for the use of the clubhouse as a basis for recovering damages. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially given, covenant enforcement has become more and more difficult now. So it might not be a bad thing, but you just need to understand that we might not be able to go after the owner. Now, if there's some sort of language in your covenants that speaks to that, there might be an avenue, but ultimately you should just expect that if the owner's not signing or signing off, that you may not be able to go after the owner through some sort of a, enforcement process. Deposit checks or hold cash. So this is for the deposit. I think it's up to you. I think it's up to the board and management and whatever works better. Some places hold them, some deposit them. If you don't trust that there's adequate funds in there, you may want to deposit and make sure, but certainly up to you. Do you have a template for HOA common area use agreement we can offer to our HOAs? So unfortunately, we don't have templates. Everything we do is for specific communities. So they're all attorney-client privileged. However, you have a list in the PowerPoint of the things that they should address. And that's a good start. You can try doing a Google search for if other associations maybe have posted something online. But unfortunately, you can't just do a sample because they're all attorney-client privilege documents. Do ADA requirements apply to a community-wide garage sales? We wouldn't have access to bathrooms, but technically we are opening up the community to the public. So, I mean, technically, yes, they would apply, but if the only thing that's open to the public is the streets, I'm not going to be overly concerned about that because, I mean, the only thing I think with ADA and streets is like curb cuts and things like that. So if you are okay with that, you know, then that's fine. I've not ever seen an association burned by having a community-wide garage sale based on ADA at least. So I think you're probably pretty safe, but you're absolutely right. It's still going to be considered a public event. Do most associations typically allow political events? That is a great question. I don't know. I kind of see, you know, what I see is limited based on, you know, just who asks me questions, but I kind of see a split on it. So sometimes I see it allowed, sometimes I see it not allowed. It's the religious events that I think people have the most issues with. What about community garage sales? Already talked about that. Does a summer picnic held in a cul-de-sac still need same considerations you just discussed? If it's a summer picnic, is it an association-sponsored one or is it a homeowner-sponsored one? I think if you know, it's homeowners and the streets are, if the streets are public and the cul-de-sac is public, there's an association shouldn't be doing anything with that because we can't regulate public streets at all. So you shouldn't worry about that. If it's a private street, then I think it's just going to depend on, are you concerned that there's going to be damage to the asphalt? Are there, you know, does the association maintain the lawns? Because, you know, these are zero lot lines and the association is concerned that there's going to be some damage to the grass, or, you know, it just depends on what is encompassed and whether the association has maintenance or repair obligations on those components. If it's an owner issue, if it's an association issue, yeah, you still want to make sure you have the special events coverage and all that stuff. If you hold a budget meeting at the rec center, is that considered an event? So that's a meeting. I wouldn't consider that a special event. That would be a meeting of the association. It's not different than your annual meeting. But if the rec center isn't the association's and you're renting it from like the Metro District or whoever, you probably want to get the extra insurance, because if the homeowners get rowdy because they get super angry about the proposed budget and they start, you know, punching walls and whatever, and breaking things, want to make sure the association is going to be covered for that. Right. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through. Is the HOA, if an HOA is allowing lemonade stands and movie night, do we still need a food service permit or pay taxes on it? I don't believe so, but I think every county and every city has its own thing going on. So if you're not sure, I would definitely reach out to the city or county and make sure that you're safe doing that. If a resident wants to have their kid's birthday at the park, first come, first serve at the park, and wants to pay to have a bouncy castle there, what needs to be done with insurance? Well, since it's an owner event, you want to make sure they get the coverage, you know, the additional coverage. You want to make sure that the association is an additional insured on the policy and you get a certificate. And if someone gets hurt on the bouncy castle, though, as we saw, there's really not, you may not be covered because it's an exclusion under coverage. So you may not want to allow bouncy castles unless they can prove to you that they've gotten enough insurance that somehow they added something that will cover the bouncy castle. because you don't want to be in a position where you're not covered should you get sued. Almost done. See, we allow owners to reserve common indoor spaces for private events at no charge. Does the owner need to check with their HO6 carrier to ensure they are covered? Well, you want to make sure, check with your insurance carrier and let them, or your broker, and let them know you are allowing your owners to hold special events in the clubhouse, and make sure that you have adequate protection. But then we're going to require that those owners, if it's a meeting of the board, that's one thing. If it's an actual, like a party or something, you want them to have the special events coverage, and you want to be an additional insured with a certificate. Okay. 4th of July parades and public streets inside the community. Special event coverage? Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Absolutely. Hey, and that's it. We've got through all the questions. It's 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining. Please fill out the survey at the end, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.